final 45 minutes, which I think is probably going to look a little bit closer to 20 minutes. Like I said, I want to thank all of you for being here today. I also want to acknowledge that we are a primarily volunteer-run organization. So I want to give a huge thanks in particular to Jessica and Lotta, Matt, John, Jason. Um, for your presentations today and for taking point on these bits of legislation. They are all volunteers who are giving their time because they care deeply about meaningful cannabis reform in Washington state. And just tremendous, deep, deep gratitude for all of the work that each of you do. I hope I did not leave somebody else off by accident. Perfect. And Nathan's putting in the chat, we will be sending out a summary right around on Monday of everything that we talked about today, as well as some additional materials. Again, I want to put a plug in. If you have not signed up for January 27th, please do so. We need everybody there having all of these conversations. And you now are the most experts of experts on our legislative agenda as we move into this short legislative session. You're also really well equipped to understand what is happening during that legislative session. Al, I'm going to sort of turn it over to you. We were going to talk a little bit about data collection. I think Dee had to hop off, so I'm going to sort of do a short version of that. We do have a data committee. Nathan, if you wouldn't mind putting that information in there. We do know when we are talking to policymakers, it's my least favorite line now at this point. It used to be my most favorite because it's sort of, I thought, we're like, well, if we don't have enough research, then that means we can kind of shape it however we want. But now I understand that when somebody says, well, we just don't have enough research, what that means is we're not going to do anything about it. And so again and again, and also again, I do work at the federal level over and over and over. The thing we need the most is data, 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 data. And that doesn't always specifically mean scientific research. In particular, that I think a lot of our lift is around qualitative research, storytelling of what the impacts the laws are having. But then also you saw that beautiful data dashboard, some screen grabs of those. With cannabis hospitality, we are working on dashboards through our data committee for each one of our legislative initiatives. Cannabis hospitality was the first to go. We're currently working through some logistics on how we use Power BI or another so that those dashboards are interactive. But data is an extremely powerful storytelling tool when we are working with policymakers, particularly around cannabis, which is oftentimes something that they have not interacted with a whole lot, or their only knowledge is the parking lot of the first job that they had in high school or in college, but really not a lot of knowledge about the actual business and or medical application of the plant as it pertains to policy and even public health for that matter. So if you are interested in joining the data committee specifically or being a part of that, we've got the information for that in the chat. And Nathan will make sure that you get connected there. But that is this year, in addition to quality testimony, a really and cogent materials. I want to thank Kristen's on the call, who has worked on those one pagers. And again, we're working on getting up to date as we are getting information about new bills coming at us from the legislature, to have those pertinent materials that we also have really thorough data dashboards for folks to interact with. So with that, Al. We've talked a lot. We've done a deep dive into each of our pieces of legislation. As we prepare, everybody's probably a little information exhausted at this point. Do you have any sort of wrap up words, considerations for folks, things that people might be interested in checking out as we'll all sort of enter into that weird cheese time. Where we don't know what day or time it is, but there's plenty of cheese. It's my favorite time of year. Side note. That's why I call it the cheese time.
Well, I'll also add to it that there is the sausage making aspect. If you're going to have cheese, then maybe you want to have sausage. And usually the making of legislation or the passage of legislation is a lot like making sausage. It takes bits and pieces of everything. You kind of stir it all in. You're not quite sure what you're going to get, but at the end, you got something, hopefully. And if it doesn't work this year, then you work on changing it for the next year or whatever. A couple things that I want to use as part of the wrap up. The first thing, and one of the most important things an association or an alliance or a group or an organization can do, and that is if you're having lobby day, be a participant. You're going to learn a lot, even if you think you know the whole process or you hate the whole process. It's still a good idea to go because it's an educational experience for everybody, including the legislator or the staff that you run into. Um, every group I, I I talk to legislators all the time, and they're going, "Oh my God, it's such and such lobby day. We're going to have hordes of people coming through the halls, but it's really important." Every group that has any kind of strong interest in Olympia goes. I mean, the gun lobby has their lobby day, and people are wandering around with rifles and handguns. They can't go into the buildings or into the offices, but they can walk around the statues and the fountains and outdoors. They usually pick a day to where it's really nice, and everybody shows up, with their leather vests and everything. So you got that, and then you have the anti gun lobby that will show up and do their thing. One of my favorites used to be, and I don't mean to be offensive. I hope I'm not offensive to anyone, but you used to have the pro-life and the pro-choice people showing up on the very same day, and there were way too many fist fights and occasional an arrest, and so they've decided to not do pro-life and pro-choice on the same day. They have the different days, and there are hundreds of people that will show up for each of those. So and it is a really good experience for legislators to see their constituents coming in. And I would hope that you take a look at coming down in January. And it's really helpful to people like myself when I go in to a legislator's office to talk about one of our issues, and they go, "Oh, I can't believe how many people were in my office talking about it," or "I really ran into some constituents I've never run into before, and that was really valuable conversation." Whatever. That I think is one of the most important things that you can do. And it's part of what I call learning the legislative process. Um, there are different ways to get a bill into law, but the process is still pretty standard. And if you get a chance to spend some time learning that process, that's really important. When we'll talk about this before lobby day or on lobby day, but have specific lobbying objectives. What bill is it that you really want to get passed, or what is it that you really don't like in someone else's bill? Work on the negative side, and that's very helpful. Be concise and to the point when you send a letter or an email to a legislator. Get right to it because they're not going to spend a lot of time reading a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 page epistle. So state who you are, what your thinking is, to the point, and be courteous all the way through it. It's also important to know what the opposition is going to say so that you can be prepared for it. Know what the opposing points are to whatever position you have so that you're able to discuss it if the legislator brings it up, because you never know if that opposition had their lobby day the week before. So, or what we call hike the hill. Um, we try to minimize our spokespeople when it comes to confronting legislators. They need to know, like the chairs of the committee need to know who they can go to instantly for a quick response, whether it be me or Caitlin or John Kingsbury on patient issues. So we don't want the whole world trying to uh, lobby without knowing what the strategy is, and just working through us is really an important way to do it. um, and one of the final things is keep your big guns in reserve. After we get all the data and the evidence and it's getting close to the end of the session, then we'll all come in with the big guns, whether it be a retail owner in a specific district that that legislator needs to be educated on, or Caitlin or myself or other board members, the president. Um, there's ways to go about doing it to be effective. There's ways that don't really help the cause either. And if you have any doubts, get a hold of us. I think those are kind of the points that I wanted to bring up. But there's one important point that, um, well, a couple things. One is the um, in a representative democracy, individual opinions and views are used to help form policy, and that's what we're doing. Is we're forming policy. Legislators can, on their own, come up with some ideas, and they do oftentimes, but they have to be pretty knowledgeable in the subject area. Most of them aren't. We are. So use our knowledge to the best extent that we can to form policy, to move policy, to change policy. And that's an important piece. Um, I have a theorem about legislative involvement is that a person's involvement in the legislative process is directly related to the amount of negative impact the system has on them. So if your business is being affected in a negative way, or um, there are things, it doesn't even have to be in the cannabis realm, but things that you are affected by, it's usually by a negative impact rather than a positive impact. And so use that to your advantage. We use it to our advantage in saying the people are being harmed. The tax paying system isn't fair and should be used for X, Y, and Z rather than for building parks in rural communities. Things like that, so that we can and Mike, you're absolutely right on. Harm reduction is really the biggest point that we have, and that's part of why the restructuring of the LCB is there, and homegrow too, I would argue. So with that, that's all I really have to add. But the bottom line is, if you're doing this, it is time consuming and it can be a little tricky. We're here to help, but have fun with it too. This is not supposed to be a negative experience. It's supposed to be a positive experience so that you can have a huge impact on what that change is for the future.
Yahoo. Thanks, Al. I would like to leave everybody, I don't know, in the chat you can see 420 passed about 5 minutes ago. I think everybody's earned a little bit of weed. If you would like to partake, by all means. We're wrapping up here. I would like to leave you with an action item, and that is something that you can do right now, today, or tomorrow. It's just a couple of small steps. If you've signed up for Lobby Day, you've already looked up what your legislative district is, but all you have to do is put your address into Google, ask what your LD is, and then find out who you'll have: one senator and two representatives. That if you would like our help, I'm happy to help you find those emails, but those emails should also be pretty readily available. And I'd like you to send them an email. Just introduce yourself. Hi, my name is, I'm a constituent. You can give them zip code. I think usually works better at the municipal level because I think some zip codes are in different districts. But you can just say, I live in, and describe the neighborhood that you're in. And I would like to introduce myself. I care about dot dot dot, and write a couple of sentences about what it is that you care about, and just let them know that you're excited for the upcoming session. You can pick even one or two things that you'd like to see happen, and then just leave it at that. You can ask the robots to help you write it even, and send it off, and then they know that they have a constituent, because sometimes what will happen is things will start to cross their desk. Occasionally legislative assistants will catalog that, and there may be something they come across that they want to know how their constituents feel. They may reach out to you afterwards and say, hey, I got an email from you on this. This bill is coming up. I'd like to hear what you think about it. Bare minimum, though, they have that email so that later on, when we send calls to action to you about particular legislation and say, hey, we need you to write and we'll give you a form letter, they've seen your name before. They know that you've taken the time and it's outside of the crush of the legislative session, so that it's a little bit easier for them to remember who you are. So again, find your people, send them an introductory email that says, I am and I care about. and send it off.
So one of the things that I will be doing on lobby day is we'll get together before we go hike the hill. I will have gone through each one of you's assignments, what legislator you're going to see that day, and have a conversation with you before you go up to give them a. They're really good on cannabis. They're terrible on cannabis. They always vote against. They're really open to the argument, just so that you have a little background as to where they fit into the whole uh, cannabis scheme of things. So we'll help you.
Whew. How's everybody feeling? Full of knowledge.